If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members. Unlimited defense budgets, unmatched legal expertise. Carry the same level of support police officers have. Carry CCW Safe, the highest caliber.
And we're back. My name is Chris Evan. I'm the CEO of Survival Dispatch, and we have the president from CCW Safe with us tonight, Kent Brown.
Hi, Chris. Good to see you.
Likewise. Appreciate you joining us. That's funny. I just got to tell you a quick anecdote. The Rolling Stones played a concert in some small theater in New York City, maybe 20 years ago or so. And after the first set, everybody goes backstage, and then Keith, what's his name again? Keith
Richards.
Keith Richards comes walking out, and he's got a cigarette in his hand and a big ash on the end of it. And he says, "Good evening. It's good to see you." He starts laughing. He's like, "Actually, it's good to see anybody." so every time I hear somebody now say it's good to see you, that for some reason pops up in my mind.
And that guy's still alive, which is hard to believe.
Yeah, him and Ozzy Osbourne, huh? Preserved by chemicals or something like that. So, Kent, let me just give a quick, brief description of CCW Safe from my side, and then you can speak to it if I make any mistakes. But essentially, from our side, CCW Safe provides legal defense services and other benefits for individuals who use their firearms or other implements in self-defense. I can say that you're the one and only coverage, self-defense coverage that we work with at Survival Dispatch. There's a whole story behind that we went for 18 months not representing or recommending anybody. And the reason we went with y'all, in addition to you having great people, I had a great exchange over 18 months with Gary, but is no recoupment clauses or clawback, clauses. And I don't think most people are aware that it's against the law to pay insurance benefits to somebody who's broken the law. So if you accept that plea bargain, like most attorneys recommend that you do, 95% of cases never get in front of the jury, you may be innocent, and the lawyer may say, don't roll the dice. It could be decades in jail. Take the plea to the misdemeanor. You've just admitted that you're guilty, and now the recoupment clauses kick in. And I really like the way that Mike, your co-founder, Mike Darter, stated it. When we got on this subject, he says, "Let me just tell you this. We believe that our competitors will do exactly what they say they're going to do," which was a rather deft way of saying it. So anyway, how did I do as far as describing CCW Safe?
Yeah, you did really well. And, Mike is right. We always say that other people do exactly what they say they're going to do. For us, they just don't do the things that we do. There's just so many things that we do that they're not willing to, that they don't have the expertise to do. And then, of course, even down to the structure of the business, where we're not selling an insurance policy and they are. That's an important tenet of how we take care of our members. It gives us freedom and the flexibility to just do whatever we need to do when somebody needs it. And so Mike hit the nail on the head when he said that.
Yeah. So again, that was a big reason that we kind of hit the pause button for 18 months. It didn't work with anybody in your industry, was the fact that you're not selling insurance, you're selling member benefits. And there's a captive insurance policy on CCW Safe protecting your business, but it has nothing to do with the end user. There's no insurance, policy per se, right?
Yeah, that's right. And, some people are not that familiar with the term or even the concept of captive insurance. The easiest way to think about it is it's like a private insurance company. And so it has the same ownership as CCW Safe, but it just has one insured entity, to your point, right? Which is it insures CCW Safe in order to provide the benefits that we give to our members, which is according to the terms of service. And so the terms of service is really what governs the relationship, primarily between us and the members. So there's never an insurance company involved in any part of the transaction. There's not someone from the captive company who is like, oh, I need to know what you're doing with this person. And, we don't like this. that does not work like that at all. And so we go according to the terms of service. We provide the benefits, and then we use the captive or the private insurance in order to just get reimbursed, and also to have a financial instrument, that gives us the strength and third-party oversight to make sure that we always have the resources that we'll need for our members. So it's not just up to, Kent or Mike to sit around and go, hey, we should probably have this much money on hand in case something happens. That's not the right way to do it. And so the captive gives us another tool and another instrument to make sure everybody's taken care of.
Yeah, and we'll get into all the value adds that you have, but my message to the Survival Dispatch audience, since we reached an agreement a couple months ago, was if you have self-defense coverage right now, look for it. Does it say it's an insurance policy? Do you see a recoupment clause, a clawback clause? And if you do, you may want to investigate other avenues than that. And there's another product that kind of varies from y'all, and I'm not going to get deep into it, but it was brought to our attention on 2 instances where these people had paid an onboarding fee, like an initiation fee, and then monthly fees, and then were involved in a citizen involved shooting, and were told, yeah, absolutely, we will defend you. But before we start working on defending you, you have to pay X amount of dollars for the expert witnesses. And in the one case, it was over 50,000, and in the other case, it was 250,000. And in neither case did they have the liquidity, the individual had that liquidity to do that. So the money they'd been paying for this membership wasn't worth the paper it was written on. So even if it's not an insurance policy and there's no recoupment clause, it still pays to read the fine print, because could be life-altering stuff at the end of the day.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we always talk about to potential members, there's 2 major risks for you or your family after you get into one of these serious incidents. And of course, it's loss of finances, right? I mean, you might have to cash in the 401k or get a second mortgage, or maybe not even come up with it at all. And then your loss of freedom. You could end up in jail or prison for a very, very long time, even though you may not have done anything wrong, because you can't afford the best defense. And so all these things sort of go hand in hand. And it pains me to hear about people that are, in our industry, so-called, that just don't have the basics right, and paying for criminal defense, civil defense costs, all of those in an unlimited fashion and paid up front. I mean, that should be the table stakes for anybody in the industry. And, some people don't have that, which is unfortunate.
So before we get into all the questions that I put together, I want to tell a quick little short story. And you and I have discussed this in the past, but in 2012, Chick-fil-A donated some money to a couple Christian sporting events, groups, organizations. And the pundit said, that's it. That's the end of Chick-fil-A. They won't survive this. And in reality, their numbers took off like a hockey stick after that. And, we could debate all day whether or not their fast food is any better than anybody else's from a nutrition standpoint. Not really. But people will go to Chick-fil-A because they share the same values and beliefs. They're closed on Sundays. They treat their employees well. If you have a good employee experience, you'll have a good customer experience. All those reasons, but really because we don't necessarily attract what we want. We attract what we are. So all those people who share those beliefs patronize Chick-fil-A. So as I was having conversations with Gary and Chad and other people on your team, started to realize there was really close alignment between CCW Safe's values and our values at Survival Dispatch. So that's another reason we gravitated towards your company.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's, a lot of companies say they're mission driven, right? You hear that term sometimes in the corporate world, and it's fine for people who are making coffee, right? It's like they have a mission to give you a great coffee experience and start your day right. That's wonderful. But here it really is a mission, and it's a mission of caring for people in what's probably going to be the worst incident of their life. And so that's always the North Star for us. Everything we do points at that, and all the things that flow from it is what the values come from, what the mission comes from, is doing those things that are the right thing when people need us.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, if we were going to sum up, you know, the why, the purpose of CCW Safe, whether or not somebody on your team has verbalized it in these words or not, it was very clear that it's looking after your members' best interests throughout everything, right?
It is, and it really is just in two areas, right? I mean, it's of course caring for them completely, you know, throughout the aftermath of their incident. Now, the majority of our members are not going to be involved in a self-defense incident. So, you know, what we provide for those folks is really education, training, content that'll help them assess, you know, understand, hopefully avoid, you know, whether it's de-escalation or withdrawal, or, you know, avoid being in one altogether. And so we try to have something for everybody. And that piece of it is just as important to us as taking care of the ones who've been in an incident, because again, the majority of folks are not going to have that. So if they'll just take part in some of our content, we know they're going to be able to have a better outcome with, you know, at Christmas time when you get in the parking lot brawl with somebody and things turn south, and how to deal with that, and whatever those instances might be. So yeah, it's literally the member is the North Star, as people like to say. Everything we do here is to just take care of them. And so if we're doing something that doesn't work in one of those elements, or it's not related to that, then we stop doing it. We just do what takes the best interest.
I would think that one of the intangibles, which is the case for my wife and I, is that, yeah, we pray that we're never in a citizen involved shooting, but having the peace of mind, knowing that we've got somebody to protect us if that happens, God forbid, it's hard to qualify and it's hard to quantify exactly what that's worth, but it's significant. And
yeah, you know, I would say, Chris, and I've been with the company over 3 years now, you know, a lot of people look at the industry and they acknowledge that they need something, right? And a lot of firearms owners, and they get hung up on the financial piece, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. That's a very, very important piece. So the example you just gave a couple of minutes ago, right? That was destructive for that person. But there's so much more to it that's really critical. You know, you're a pretty experienced guy. You've been through a lot of stuff. You probably have a much better idea of what you might go through. But the average firearms owner who has their gun at home for safety, or they're carrying, you know, in their daily life, they don't know what's going to happen to them when the legal system and the law enforcement folks start looking at their incident. It's very difficult to navigate, and the experience the team has that gets you through that makes a huge difference. You know, nobody else does that. And still in 3 years, I can't understand why no one will do the things that we'll do. But we don't consider it difficult. Now, it's difficult to have the right people and know how to apply it, but the concept is pretty straightforward. So we're really proud of how we do it.
yeah, and as you should be, absolutely. I think, you know, most people are not, for lack of a better term, inoculated against the stress that they will be under if and when they're in a citizen involved shooting, right? And so you're under duress, your heart rate's off the chart, you're not making the best decisions. And it really helps to have a plan and play some of this out in your head. So Mike was telling me the coverage that y'all offer for law enforcement in New York, for example.
Yeah.
And years ago, when I transferred my concealed weapons permit from Texas to Florida, it's more of a formality here in Florida than it is in Texas. In Texas, it's a weekend course. You actually have to shoot accurately and all those things. In Florida, you don't have to do that. But we were fortunate enough that the instructor, he was a really interesting guy, and he had all kinds of pictures from different incidents that he had been the detective on during his career that really drove his message home, regardless of what the subject at hand was. Like, for example, you never point the gun at something you're not willing to destroy. He pulled up a picture of a guy's foot missing his big toe, and the guy had the mag out and thought it was empty, and he's dry firing around the room, and he did it a few times before he pointed at his toe and pulled it. And of course, that's when the bullet went off and took his big toe with it, sort of thing. So, I mean, the plural of anecdote is not data, but there's still some value in anecdotal stuff. But what tweaked me in Mike's conversation on that, and he was describing like the SOP that New York law enforcement have when they're in a police involved shooting. And I said to him, I said, well, that detective who did the concealed weapons permit stuff here in Florida that we were at specifically said that if you are in a citizen involved shooting, that your first call or your, spouse's first call is to 911. And you don't say that you shot somebody. You say there's been a shooting, send an ambulance. And then he said, when the ambulance arrives, you tell them that you're having chest pains and you need to get to the ER right away. And so the paramedics can whisk you off to the hospital. And while you're at the hospital, either yourself or your wife can call your provider. In this case, for Cindy and me, it would be CCW Safe. There's my challenge coin, by the way, which is pretty cool. And by the way, we pay for our own. You guys didn't give us a free membership or anything like that. We're happy to pay. Just wanted to make sure that's clear with our audience. This is not a case of you saying, here's a free membership and, promote our product at all. But anyway, it was a good point on his part, because now you've got time for an attorney or at least an advisor to show up before you say something that a slick DA could use against you in a court of law. So it just little things like that, I guess, right? Being able to run through it in your mind. Like my wife knows that we've got a code word. If I scream, get on the ground, she's dialing 911 the second she hears those words. And that's just a process that we have between the two of us. So we had a peeping Tom. We've got a cabin in the middle of nowhere, Georgia. It's the end of a private road, end of a private driveway that's gated off at the very top of a mountain. And there was a peeping Tom in that area. And lo and behold, he shows up at our place in the middle of the night, and I'm chasing after him. And I'm smart enough to know not to shoot somebody in the back when they're running away, but I'm hollering at him, get on the ground, get on the ground. And by the time I got back to the front door of the cabin, my wife was already on the phone with 911. So that's nice. Kind of how the process works on that. And we've actually got some pretty funny security footage from that night, Kent, of me going out, standing on the porch with an SBR slung around my shoulders in my boxer shorts. So,
oh boy. Well, yeah, it helps to know, and in fact, you're talking about, what to say to the police. And of course, Gary, you can go on our resources page on the website and search Gary. He did a really nice video on here, here's the top things to do in dealing with the police after your incident. And he's got 1 through 10. I'm going to get the years wrong. So if he's watching this, he can send me a text and tell me I'm wrong. But, about 30 years of law enforcement and investigative experience, he knows what to do. And so we have his point of view that we published out to the members. That one's been out for a couple of years, but it's well worth watching.
Kind of off topic, but kind of on topic with this part of our conversation. So there's a company owned by a family in northern Idaho. They made a bunch of money on commercial real estate, retired, and they have this thing called Conflicted the Game. And I've lost track now, but there's maybe 13 or 14 different decks. And most of it, pardon me, is set in a post-apocalyptic setting. And the reason they created the game was to give people mental reps to think through what they would do in an SHTF situation. And I can't overstate the importance of that sort of thing from somebody who's been in, multiple situations, let's say, in the past. And it really pays to have a plan for this stuff. Again, we pray for the best and, hope that things don't go off the rails. But if they do, and you've never applied any thought to it, you could very well become your own worst enemy again in the hands of a, vindictive DA like Alvin Bragg, for example.
That's right. Yeah. I'm sure a lot of your viewers, members, right, they spend a ton of time on the firearms training, right? Shooting, moving, all the things that they want to get good at. And it's super helpful, but you do need to spend some time on the mental aspect and the aftermath aspect. It's people forget that. So you can be the best shooter in the world. And to your point, then, create some extra grief for yourself if you don't know how to handle those steps afterwards. We have a lot of material on the website about that. So we have over 1,000 pieces of content on the site, which people can view for free. By the way, you don't have to be a member to see over 1,000 pieces of content.
Yeah, it's an amazing resource for sure, Kent. And it's interesting that you said, you've got to practice these things. I put 1,000 rounds downrange every week, and some of it's dry fire, like, small kinetics. Sometimes it's live fire, sometimes it's both. But if somebody thinks that they're going to shoot accurately with an elevated heart rate, 140, 150 beats per minute, it just doesn't work out that way. And I've referenced a video a few times where there's a construction site and this carjacker comes along, steals a 1-ton dually, and one of the construction workers is 5 feet away from him. The door's open. He takes 6 shots at the carjacker and didn't hit, not one of them hit from 6 feet away. And so the guy who stole the truck puts it in reverse, backs up 50 feet, puts it back in drive, and runs over the guy and kills him that couldn't shoot him from 6 feet away. It sounds ridiculous, but when I started doing run and gun training, which I do 5 days a week with an elevated heart rate, I'll tell you what, it's an eye opener at just how much practice you need to start to get accurate. So we preach this all the time, by the way, Kent, is that
yeah. Oh, it sounds like I need to come down and get some training.
training's imperative, right? So I mean, you can go to the range, and most indoor ranges, unless they have like a private range, you can't draw from a holster. So really what you're doing is getting familiar with the controls and maybe dialing in an optic, and that's good. But it's got to be more than that. So dry fire stuff is great as well. I love the Mantis X systems.
I just got one. I haven't even turned it on and started using it. I just got it. So and I want my wife to use it as well.
So here's the thing with the Mantis X, you can use it inside, you can use it outside. You can do different types of drills. It will report all of your mechanics. I was having a problem when I first went to the Mantis, and I went to the Blackbeard X when it was released, maybe I want to say 4 years ago or so. For some reason, my second shot was always way worse than my first shot was. And basically what was happening is I would pull that trigger the first time, and the SBR would cantilever ever so slightly, like 3.5 degrees. And it told me that in the app. So I made a conscious effort to make sure that I wasn't canting the gun at all, and it improved almost immediately. Here's the thing, like with the Mantis stuff, if that's all somebody were to use, you will hit a wall, like you'll plateau with it. And I've given a Blackbeard system to some very accomplished pistol shooters, and they've scored like 40%, 50% range, 60% range, and they were kind of discouraged. But it's like anything else, the more you do, the better you get. But what I found is once you get into the 90s, like you're consistently shooting 92 plus, you're not probably going to improve anymore with that tool. So you might have to do some other things, like that Unit Solutions rifle behind me shoots an 8mm projectile. It's got built-in simulated recoil. It's the same weight as a Mark 18. It's neat. And where it's really neat, Ken, is you can take the Mantis X10, which can go on anything, shotgun, longbow, pistol, whatever. Well, you can put that on the pick rail on that Unit Solutions to get the best of both worlds. You get the feedback on all of your mechanics, plus you get the audible of the projectile either ringing steel, or they have man marking rounds. So if you're using paper targets, you can see exactly where you hit. But man, I'll tell you what, we put a lot of work into our briefs, Kent, and we haven't even touched it yet.
Okay. So I'm going to focus to be ready then.
Well, yeah, I was just thinking, I don't want to consume any more of your time than we need to, but let's hit some of these questions, and some of them I may skip because we've addressed some of this stuff. But I guess the first and most obvious question is why does CCW Safe even exist?
Yeah, and you had Mike on, so he probably told you his whole story of how he wanted to start the company. He and the other co-founders were looking for someone to take care of them after they retired from active duty police work. The FOP does not take care of you after that, and so they were looking for a solution similar to what the FOP provides, which is the best of the best for officer involved shootings. And so they looked at what was in the market, and they were like, this is garbage. Like, these are nothing. This will not cut it. And so they started the company originally on that police model to provide that same level of service that officers were getting in officer involved shooting. And we've evolved over time, and like we have thousands and thousands of officers who use us for their off-duty coverage.
That's awesome.
And they say, this is really better, than what we get with the FOP now. So we just exist to take care of folks after they're involved in a self-defense incident, and sometimes people think, well, that's discharging the firearm. And a lot of the incidents that our members get into, the firearm is never drawn, the firearm is certainly never discharged in most of those cases. And so there is still a huge need for helping them when the incident occurs, whether they're using some other weapon, fists, hands, but we've seen it all. And sometimes there's not even any physical exchange, and they're still going to get some police involvement that we want to help them with. So that's the reason we exist. When people are lawfully defending themselves, we want to take care of them.
So that's funny you should mention that, Kent. So before we got Stand Your Ground, which we were the first in the nation, that was 2006. It was almost a daily occurrence in the news of like local news of somebody being charged with brandishing a weapon. So, and here's an interesting stat to go with that, Kent, is that for as long as I can remember, 70% of Floridians who are killed by gunshot wound and did not commit suicide were shot with their own weapon. So, and that's true to today.
Wow.
So basically what happens is the person, brandishes the gun or pulls the gun, goes into condition black, freezes up, bad guy takes their gun away and shoots them with it. So
the brandishing is still, that is our number one occurrence, right, in terms of just count for the members get into that we assist with. And so it still happens, or they get something very similar, even if they didn't brandish, probably in the way that most people think about it. And so that, the laws are pretty broad, and it varies from state to state. And so that's the number one thing. A deadly force shooting where the person that's putting your life at risk dies, those are rare, but they do happen, and they're very, very serious. And you have it in your questions later. We'll be talking about one of those.
Yeah, that's great. So as far as Mike's story is concerned, I think I said it at the time. I know I've repeated myself recently on this, but necessity is the mother of all invention. You can't find the thing to scratch your back, so you have to go and invent the thing. It's not uncommon in the small business world for sure.
Absolutely.
I don't know if Chad mentioned this to you at all, but we have some friends who are we've worked with Tom Holman, and we have friends who are close to Tom Holman, and we raised a bunch of money for Border 911, which was his nonprofit, so he could travel around the country and educate Americans on just how bad the border situation really was. And our mutual connections or close to them are now in on the ground floor on this mass deportation, specifically aimed at criminals first. That's the first wave. And one of the ways they're going to, buttress their head count, their number of people in the field, is they're going to recruit former law enforcement officers, retired military, and currently licensed armed security guards. So I sent an email off to Chad, and I said, hey, hypothetical situation, but a private citizen, volunteers to help in these mass deportations. Does CCW Safe cover that or not? And the answer was really interesting. He came back and said, if that person is being compensated, no, CCW Safe doesn't cover them. But if it's 100% volunteer, yes, they're covered. So I don't know if anybody else offers that. I haven't dug deep into it, but that's a pretty interesting thing, because this is going to be quite the endeavor.
Chad, and he's speaking broadly there, right, with that particular answer. And so we honestly haven't had an internal discussion about precisely what you're talking about, right? Which is slightly different than like his example is probably based on how we do house of worship security teams. And so volunteer security teams at churches, synagogues, yes, even mosques, those are covered if they're volunteers. The paid security folks, we don't. It's always the responsibility of the employer to have a paid security team to provide that kind of stuff. And so we haven't specifically talked about the scenario you are, but defense of others is covered. Volunteer security teams is the house of worship is a pretty known entity in terms of what happens there. And so we're open to anything that makes sense. And that one, my question would be, is DHS or whoever it's going to be really going to let volunteers be involved? That's what I understand.
So not in the frontline capacity. Okay.
Yeah.
So Tom has a few different strategies. One of them is that if there are people who are desk jockeys that have a badge and a gun, he's going to ask them to help everybody else in the field, to do the arrests and accompany, whoever they capture out of the country, basically, and then fill those positions with short-term private contractors to look after the administrative function that person will be leaving behind. Then the next part, as far as law enforcement officers, retired law enforcement, military vets, and licensed armed security guards, would kind of be something along the lines of like a neighborhood watch on steroids, where they provide extra eyes and ears. So they're not interdicting, the target.
Gotcha.
But they're intelligent enough and experienced enough to relay the information, the intel that's needed by the teams that will actually do the physical portion of it. So I don't think you're going to see any volunteers, be physically involved unless there's some sort of crazy extenuating circumstance.
Yeah, right. Makes sense. Well, yeah, it sounds interesting. That's something we should circle back on, talk about, because
happy to make connections for you on that,
yeah.
Ken, because they're much smarter than I am, and they're really close to this. So I'm just making a quick note on that.
Sure, no problem.
All right, so back to our question. So we've already covered the core mission, so no need to do that. I get a quick question on that though. Has that changed at all, or was it always we're going to look after the members? That's our call to action.
Yeah, it doesn't change, right? The core mission doesn't change. Now, we've added some extra benefits to the plans over the years and things like that, but the core mission doesn't change. And we're really solely focused on that. There's been things that other opportunities that arise, and there's some things in a later question that I think we'll hit, but that people want us to do, or other companies in our industry do, that aren't related to taking care of folks after a self-defense incident, that we just have never done, and we probably will never do, because we just do this one thing and we're the best at it. And so there's no reason to get distracted from putting everything we have into taking care of the members.
I promise I won't go down this rabbit hole very deep, but there's a really famous essay by Isaiah Bryant called The Hedgehog and the Fox. And as it relates to being in business, and I'm really giving you the Cliff Notes version, have you ever seen a fat fox, for example?
No, they're always skinny.
Yeah, and there's a reason they're always skinny. They're a very opportunistic animal that will chase every meal that runs in front of them. But because they're not an apex predator, they don't necessarily eat on a frequent basis. There's a lot of small businesses that chase every opportunity, whether it's in their wheelhouse or not. And when they get that opportunity, they win the job. They're all in on completing that job. And then the job ends because everything in life comes to an end, good, bad, or otherwise. And all of a sudden there's nothing in the pipeline. So they're like the fox. They feast, they starve, they feast, they starve, right? And a hedgehog does one thing and one thing only. It burrows for grubs, takes them back to the den, and everybody gets fat and happy. And from a business perspective, I worked in business development for many years. You always want to be that hedgehog. Find something that you can be the best at in the world, that you love doing, and that you can make money at. It's like a three-legged stool. And if you can get all three of those legs under you, you're going to be successful. So I'll get off of that. I
appreciate that.
I'll get off of that topic, but still on your service and mission.
Yeah.
And you've already mentioned a couple of things, but give us a synopsis here. Excuse me. How CCW Safe differentiates your company from other legal defense programs, self-defense programs.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep it at a pretty high level without getting too far into the weeds. But there's really three things that we focus on and we kind of hang our hat on. And the first of those, if you're on the website, you'll see some references to deep expertise. And so our team has this incredible amount of experience talent and expertise in the most critical areas that are needed. And so legal is the first example, right? The folks that we have on staff, there's over 100 years of legal experience as full-time employees. And you're talking about Don West, I think, who some of your viewers would know, particularly for those guys in Florida, right? Don's got 39 years criminal defense experience. He's one of the top criminal defense attorneys in North America. You know, he's the guy that when you get connected on our hotline, 90% of the time, Don's the guy you're going to get connected to. We have another attorney, Jennifer Chance, who's here in Oklahoma City. Her background is actually as a prosecutor. And so she was prosecuting people in self-defense cases. And so she brings a whole different perspective. Then on the law enforcement side, same thing, 100+ years of experience. And many of those in homicide and a ton of investigative experience. So nobody has that. You know, no one has that on their staff. That's all outsourced for these other companies, and they just seem unwilling to do it. And so why is that important? Because we know exactly what's going to happen. We know how to get you through it. You know, and those experts, by the way, at least one of those is going to be deployed to your location, a boots on the ground response. Again, nobody does that as well. So if you have a deadly force shooting in, you know, make it up, Madison, Wisconsin, and you call our hotline right now, Chris or Gary are going to be on a plane, the next plane available to be in front of you and helping you. I mean, I could give you story after story about what that means to somebody. You know, we had a member just last year where actually we sent both. This was a very serious incident and the member was in jail. And when he came out, we got him bonded out. You know, we had two people standing across the street from the jailhouse when he got let out, and we were waiting in a Walgreens parking lot or whatever it was. And he came out straight to us. His attorney had already told him, they're waiting for you. Like, they're going to be ready for you. And they've got everything, you know, to get you through what's going to happen right now. And this guy had been arrested in the middle of the night. He was in boxer shorts and a t-shirt, and I don't even think he had shoes on. And of course, they don't let you go get dressed when they're arresting you at 4 a.m. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, we had a hotel for him, we got food, clothes, all that kind of stuff. So we weren't there to investigate, even though I had two really excellent investigators there. That's not what we're there for. We're there for peer support and getting you through the process. And so nobody else will do that. And we're the only ones. That's a huge differentiator. The second thing we really talk about is holistic coverage. The whole suite of benefits that we offer is just more complete than what anybody else offers, whether it's the financial pieces down to the counseling services. Now, a lot of that has been copycatted over the years, but it's not delivered as well, or it has, in some cases, financial caps on it. And then we talked, I think, briefly earlier about investigators and expert witnesses. You know, that's included in our legal defense, and it's all uncapped. Some of the other folks have caps on just specifically on that portion. And so that holistic coverage is a big deal. And then the last one is the personal care, which really I just alluded to, you know, with the boots on the ground response. You know, your critical response coordinator, even if it's a relatively minor incident, is going to be someone with 20 or 30 years of law enforcement experience, or one of our experienced attorneys. That's the person you're calling. You're not talking to a paper pusher who's like, yeah, we'll get that bill in here and we'll get it paid, and, you know, call us if you need us. Like, you have a person who's been through it or who's helped hundreds of people through it, and that's the person that you get. And it's very, very personal what we do here. It's not a transaction for us. Once we kick in that team, it's very, very personal.
Yeah, one of the things Mike mentioned kind of in the same vein that I thought was really interesting, Kent, was he said, you know, there's been multiple occasions when somebody was in the situation you described where they don't even have clothes, you know, because they were, you know, nabbed in the middle of the night. And he was saying how your team goes and gets them clothes and stuff. And Mike said, that's not even in the policy. It's just part of the things that we do to look after people. So
humanity, right? I mean, it's a person, and they're literally going through the worst thing that could possibly happen to them, short of death. And it's just humanity. In fact, we had, in one of those situations, we had a person who was newer on our critical response team, now, you know, about in the law enforcement experience, investigative experience, but their question was, well, you know, do we have to get some of these things approved before we do them? And I'm like, no, like you just do what the person needs at that moment. You don't have to call in and get approved to go get the guy a couple shirts and some, jeans and a pair of sneakers so he has something to wear. Like, don't worry about that. Just your job is to take care of them, and whatever that may include.
So this is probably a pretty bad pun, but shoot first, ask questions later.
Yeah, you're right. It is, but it's
saying.
definitely, to Mike's point, you can't list every little thing that might occur as a benefit. I mean, it's just and you can't foresee every tiny little thing, but a lot of those things we know they're coming. But again, you'd have a 47-page contract trying to list
Right.
every tiny detail of every encounter that we have. And so what we want them to understand is that somebody's there advocating for you in person, and we're there to get you through and support you through those initial phases with the boots on the ground. And it has nothing to do with your legal case. It has nothing to do with investigating the scene and trying to figure out exactly what happened. They actually don't ever discuss that. And they tell the member, don't tell me what happened. Do not go into that, because those are not privileged conversations. Those need to be with the attorney. And so they get that covered right up front, and they go, now, here's what we can talk about. You just got bonded out. We're going to meet with your attorney tomorrow. We're going to do this next. We're going to get you some food. All the things that we're going to do to take care of them, but we're not talking about the details of the incident.
Yeah, that's great advice for sure. My friend Todd Callender is a very notorious federal level attorney. He's the attorney who sued Lloyd Austin and the DOD over the injections on behalf of 400,000 troops, by the way. There were 51 attorneys, and Todd was the lead attorney because he's federally licensed and he'd been in front of the Supreme Court before. But he's also the CEO of a global insurance company that has greater holdings than Berkshire Hathaway. He bought the CloudHub social media platform after the founder, Jeff Brain, passed away unexpectedly at a young age. He bought 850 square miles in Chile not too long ago to turn into an autonomous community in case things go bad in America, that, wealthier Americans have somewhere to escape to. Really a very broad range of experience and whatnot. And I had a comment. I was going to tie that back to your stuff, and my sometimers is kicking in. I don't have Alzheimer's. I got sometimers, which is why I have to write everything down with my pen. It'll come back to me in a second, though. But I'm curious, Kent, what was your background before you came to CCW Safe?
Yeah, my background is primarily just business, right? I had been in the outdoor industry. I was VP of sales and trade marketing and retail at Coleman. Worked there for a couple of times and worked for some other, large consumer products companies, but also had run some smaller businesses that were reaching a similar stage that CCW Safe was. And that's one of the reasons that they tried to recruit me, was the founders had reached a point where the business was growing very, very rapidly. And this is about 4 years ago. And they wanted to make sure that they had someone who could shepherd the business through the growth and make sure that the resources and the processes and the systems were in place to provide care to members, regardless of how fast it grew or what size it got to, that they just didn't want to risk not being able to do that, because their background were law enforcement. They had done a great job with the business. I mean, there were times, in those early years when you called the hotline, it just went to Mike or Stan's cell phone directly. And that was the process. And of course, they still got it done with excellence, but you can't scale that where you just have a single person answering a cell phone sometimes, and the systems and the finances and all the people that it takes to be able to support people the way that we do. That was really the primary mission when they found me. And so when we heard about the opportunity, we were like a lot of firearms owners. And I say we, I'm talking about my wife and I. We were firearms owners. We had at home for self-defense. We'd go to the range a few times a year and shoot. We didn't really carry at the time. And we were kind of like, what is this? We didn't even know the industry existed. And I remember my wife saying, well, I don't know if it's going to be, we don't know yet. It's too early to know if that's going to be a great place for you to work and us to, move and do that. She goes, but we should sign up. That's for sure. We should get a membership, whether or not, that ends up being a great place to work. And of course, it is a great place to work. And And so I was able to bring all of that business experience to the table to get to do what really needed to be done on the back end of the house. So, most of this is really invisible to the members, what I do. And I also remember this. I remember the partners, Mike and Stan and Kyle, saying, here's all the things that we want to do and get improved. And they go, but the one thing you don't have to worry about is the critical response process. When somebody's in an incident, you don't have to, that's gold. Like, there's nothing that will need to be done. Now you want to have systems in place, and you want to make it more scalable and all these other things. That's great. But the one-on-one process for a member when they get into that incident, that's golden. And so you'll never have to be concerned about that. And they're absolutely right. So that was my background, primarily business. I came up through sales and marketing, but have done a lot of operations things, finance. And so we have a really, really well-built business that's very stable and growing. And obviously we provide an amazing service. So it's a great place to be.
Yeah, that's awesome, Kent. When Mike was on, and you just mentioned it as well, as far as the calls for help going out in the middle of the night to yourself and your team. I come from, big tech and a lot of work in the telephony industry. So I'm very familiar with ring groups, find me, follow me, rollover groups, all that kind of stuff. And when Mike described it, like the call comes in, and if the first person doesn't answer it within a few rings, it rolls over to the next person and the next person and the next person until somebody on our leadership team picks the phone up.
That's right. And it never makes it very far down the list. Don is amazing. Don West, he wants that call. He wants that interaction with the member. He wants to start applying his expertise, and quite honestly, his just personal care to those people immediately. Now, he does go on vacation sometimes. And so when he's on vacation, we move Jennifer to number one on the list, who's an attorney as well. So we mix it up, but that's not very often. So Don takes most of those calls. But there's a team, and maybe this isn't the time to get into it. Maybe Mike went through it all. I don't recall now, but there's a very sophisticated process that takes place when those calls come in, so that we're ready for anything. And of course, most of the time, it doesn't require the rest of the team to engage. But we can go through that.
Yeah, he did cover that, but I'd like to hear your perspective on that. I got two just quick things. I want to back up to your value propositions for a second. And this also ties into my assertion that we don't necessarily attract what we want, we attract what we are, and how people are driven to connect with people who share the same values. One of the value adds that I've been preaching to our audience has been that when I signed up for CCW Safe, my wife was automatically covered, and nobody else does that. They have family plans and stuff like that, but nobody else says, well, if you buy the ultimate membership, make sure you give us your husband or wife's information. I was pretty impressed by that. I mean, that's what I would call core, American values, at least when we grew up.
Yeah. I mean, we have a variety of plans, but that ultimate plan is a great example. The spouse is included in that, inside, outside the home. The assumption for people by the ultimate plan is that their wife may be someone who carries.
And it even says ultimate plan right on the challenge coin.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Appreciate that. So we, they put a lot of thought into how the plans were structured, and we have something for everybody. If you're a single person, the fastest growing segment of our membership is women.
I believe it.
Statistically speaking, they're smaller in numbers, and even, I'm sure right? You can look at Google Analytics and see the traffic on your website, and whether that's male or female. We've watched that trend change over the last few years too, where it's just rising quickly. But if you're a single person and you need very good coverage, we have a great plan that's $209 a year. It's going to cover just about anything that you could get into. And then if you want to start having more coverage or adding a spouse or whatever, there's things that you can do. But for $209 a year, you're going to get this really incredible service. I mean, sometimes I tell people about the service, and then they ask about the price, and I say it's $209, and they go, a month? That's pretty reasonable. No, it's $209 a year. It's $19 a month. But
Yeah.
yeah, and so we just, a lot of times in any industry, as you know, right? If you're the premium provider, the premium product, there's usually this premium price that becomes attached to it. And we're not that. We have the premium service, the premium product, but our price is equal to, if not better than, any sort of equivalency from the competitors.
Yeah, I would agree. When you mentioned women, I don't know if you caught, there was a recent piece of news that said that registered Republican women, 31% of them own guns now, and registered Democrats who are men, 29%. We now have Republican women, more Republican women than Democratic men carry guns or buy guns.
Yeah, I saw that. I loved it. I thought
Yeah,
it was interesting.
It's fantastic. And my sometimers kind of let go of me there for a second. I remember what I was going to say. So Todd and I are close friends, Todd Callender and I, and there are plenty of conversations that I get involved in with people who are in very sensitive situations. You know, they could be a whistleblower. There was one with law enforcement where this story hasn't broken yet, but it involves child sex trafficking at a very high level. It's very heinous. And so Todd put me on his payroll as a paralegal. And I don't have any training to be a paralegal, but if I preface a conversation by saying my advice is that you do not say anything to anybody without an attorney present, as soon as I utter those words as a paralegal on Todd's team, that person now has client attorney privilege between themselves and Todd's entire practice, which would include me, which means I can't repeat anything that person told me unless they say it's okay for me to repeat it. So we were discussing that whole thing with attorneys there. Excuse me.
And it's an important point. It's a very important point. And that question comes up, and I think you have it maybe a little bit later too, but that we get that question a lot from potential members about, well, gosh, if I talk to you guys on the emergency line, is that privileged, or is that is that going to get subpoenaed later, and all these things? And we've never been served a subpoena for any information, but even if we were, we have the process in place. So your detailed conversation is happening with an attorney. And we've actually gone to the trouble again. Nobody else probably did this. We hired a third-party attorney to come in and look at our processes.
Nice.
And this attorney specializes in suing other attorneys for bad practices. Gotcha. And so we're like, this is the right person to take a really hard look at how we do things and make sure that the members are protected. And so that does come up, and I'm glad I did, because we take it very, very seriously, to the point that we're hiring outside experts to make sure that we're doing everything correctly with regard to that, and we do.
No, that's amazing, Ken. It's also that's a good question for somebody to ask. What happens with what I discuss on the phone? That's a really good question. So before we go back to the questions, go ahead and describe the process. So I've been in a citizen-involved shooting. Yeah. What happens?
We call 911 first. We talked about that earlier, right? Always call 911 first. Then you call our hotline. And so there is a person who answers the phone who's not an attorney, and they just do a quick screening. It takes less than 1 minute. And people always say, well, why doesn't the attorney just answer? Well, we get calls on that line that are not emergencies. We get somebody will call that line. They go, oh, I want to update my credit card number. We're like, no, not on this line.
Right.
And people are like, well, that's not a big deal. But you know what? We have a whole team of people that get notified when that process starts. And so they've got to be free for the real reason that people call that line. So they get asked a few questions: name, current contact information, because you may be separated from your phone. We had another serious incident earlier this year where the guy's like, I'm calling from my neighbor's house, and this is the only place that you can reach me, and here's his cell phone. And so we're getting the current information. And then we're just asking, is it an emergency? And then, are you a member? Sometimes we get competitors. Members call our hotline. And so there's 4 questions that happen pretty quickly, and then they patch the call through. And then it goes into that process, right? And Don and Jennifer and Kyle are at the top of the list, who are all attorneys. And so they'll take the call. But when the call transfers, there's a group text that goes out to about 8 people. And so we all get notified. So the transferring of the call means that it has been identified as an emergency, and the person
Okay.
self-described emergency, and most of the time they weren't being on that line. And so we get the text, and now we're all notified, and then we start a process of people reporting in, right? So Gary or Chris on the critical response team, they're acknowledging that they're standing by. Everybody's sort of checking in, standing by, because at this point, they're talking to Don or Jennifer, one of the attorneys, and they're describing what's going on. And so Don and Jennifer make the assessment on, are we going to need a boots on the ground critical response? And so we're waiting. And sometimes it's 5 minutes and sometimes it's 45 minutes. It just depends on the situation and the conversation that they're having. I can tell you, there's times where I'm sitting at the breakfast table in the kitchen at 3 o'clock in the morning, in that 30 minutes between when I know it's going and we're all checked in and we're like sitting on pins and needles waiting to hear. And then if it's a critical response necessary, then the teams start checking in, like maybe with flight information. In that example I used earlier, if it was, Minneapolis, right? They're putting flight numbers and the information in, 7:30 a.m. arrives MSP at, 9:15. Location is, MapQuest is 45 minutes. So that, so they're starting to get an ETA where they could be on site. And that really all transpires in that group text while they're still talking to the attorney. And so after that, then other resources start getting deployed. So Don would start locating and vetting the correct attorney for the specific circumstances in this specific location. People always say, oh, don't you have a list? Every situation is different. If you're in a big city, Orlando, right? We could have three incidents in Orlando in the same day, and it might be 3 different attorneys, because the person that's great for simple brandishing that we talked about earlier is not the same person that we would engage in a, deadly force shooting that's going to end up with potential murder charge, right? And so it's going to be different people, and Don starts that process. There's definitely cities where we've had incidents where we know people that we want to use, but Don uses his expertise to select and then vet the right person. We'll retain them, start sending funds and getting them signed up. Members sometimes have an attorney on file that they have a preference for. And so Don will look at them and vet them. And if they're appropriate, we don't have any problem using them. We've done that numerous times. People always, it's another common thing we get, I have the attorney I want to use. And that's great. If the person is right for it, we have no problem with it. A lot of times they're not. It's like, this guy did a great job with my will. Well, that's really not who we need right now.
Yeah.
And so you're getting back to that expertise point earlier. You're getting one of the best criminal defense attorneys. He's done murder cases. He's done death penalty cases. He's selected that 80%. So all that happens quickly. It's not a matter of hours or days. That all initiates to that first call. And Don takes the ball and runs with it on the legal side, and then the CRT folks, engage on their side to get on site as soon as possible. So it's quite a detailed process, and then it goes from there. We have an SOP that takes over from there.
So I know some of your competitors like to advertise that you can have the attorney of your choice, and if you have somebody on record and they're an appropriate attorney, I can see how that's not a bad thing. But myself, I'm thinking, if you don't have an attorney lined up to defend you against these types of charges, do you really want to be choosing the attorney when you're in this, state of anxiety? Right. Or do you trust a professional like Don to find somebody who's tailor-made for the charge, the scenario, whatever the case may be? I think I'm going to defer to the expert myself, to be honest with you.
No question. I mean, the overwhelming majority of people don't know the right person, right? I mean, it depends on the severity of the case. But, the other thing to think about too is you might not even be able to do it. You might be in a jail cell. So now your spouse is tasked with that. And even, there's some companies in this industry that send out a list. Like, oh, Orlando? Okay. Well, here's a list of 10 attorneys. Well, now your spouse, it could be male, female, whatever, they're going to look at this list and do what? Which one is the right one?
Yeah.
I don't know. So now you get into that process. So we just think, honestly, we just think that system sucks. We would just much rather have a bona fide expert picking for us and helping us. Now they can participate, again, for some reason there's a conflict and you don't want to work with that person. We have some flexibility, but we're never going to accept one that we don't think can handle the case with excellence. And Don has some very, very specific requirements for all of them, but in particular, when we get into these deadly shootings, there's no compromise available there.
Yeah.
You have to have the right person, trial experience in a self-defense case, trial experience in a self-defense case that with a possible murder outcome. I mean, there's some very high bars that we have to get over. We can't take a criminal defense attorney who does shoplifting and carjacking. That's not going to get it done. So we're very particular.
The old adage, be careful what you wish for, you may just get it, comes to mind as you're describing this. And you may wish that you had this particular attorney, and you're probably better off that you don't, and like you said, let the experts choose your representation.
Yeah, sometimes the other thing people ask, Chris, is they're like, well, do you just work with people where you've negotiated prices? Or like, we never have a discussion about what it costs. There's nobody in the company saying, that guy's pretty good, but boy, he's expensive. It never happens. It never happens.
Interesting.
And we just want the best. We want the best there is, and we have no problem paying whatever their fair fee is. We're not trying to negotiate. We want the best person to get the best possible outcome for the member, and there's never a concern with what it costs.
Yeah, that's awesome, Kent.
Yeah.
So the next question I had, as far as background and role is concerned, is what unique challenges does your role as president of CCW Safe present, given the nature of your services?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, ours are probably not any different than folks in our industry or in the firearms industry. We face censorship on advertising platforms, that don't want to do business with people in our industry or the firearms industry. So, those types of things are really probably unique to us. We have the normal business stuff that anybody deals with, but those get pretty specific, right? Where it's like, Google went through a period where we couldn't use an ad that had a firearm on it. And it's like, now we got to use all these got to change all the images and resubmit and do, the members don't care about any of that, and they shouldn't. But those are the kinds of things. It's really back of the house stuff that's really unique.
That's a great point, Ken, because it's part of what we do as survival dispatch. Actually, due to my relationship with Todd's, and him owning Cloud Hub, we can put whatever we want on Cloud Hub, and so can anybody else, as long as it's not breaking the law, or pornographic in nature. So we actually kind of are proud of that we can take people who've been maligned and thrown away by big tech and still get them eyeballs for whatever their product or service is. And Google is definitely a problem in that regard. There are some interesting ways around that, by the way, which I won't go too deep into, but
well, they're off of it now. That was a brief period, and now everything is kind of smooth.
So one of the ways that you can work around these restrictions from big tech on gun stuff is to start a 501c4. So a C4 is akin to a PAC, and what the C4 puts out there is akin to, political promotion language, and it is subject to, you can't be censored for it, right? So in other words, you have a 501c4 that, again, is a political entity, and they can advertise all they want on every platform. And then what you have is when that person, clicks the ad on Google and takes them to this page for Acme Inc., this C4, then that website may have banners, links, stories that say, by the way, we're partnered with CCW Safe. Click here to learn more. And so long as it's one hop away, then you can use the C4 and leverage it that way to publish almost anything. And I've seen some C4s publish some very graphic content with a ton of guns that you would normally never see on Google, but because they're a C4, Google's aware that if they stop them, it's probably going to be a lawsuit. So
Interesting. Yeah, I had not heard that, but that's interesting.
well, that's because a friend of mine actually invented that process, and we used it in a couple instances, and it really did work. So,
Yeah.
but anyway,
Good. Yeah,
yeah,
it's not debilitating for us. It comes and goes, and we've survived all of it, and the membership is growing nicely. So,
awesome.
so far so good. Yeah.
So the next couple questions revolve around the legal landscape, and I'm curious how you see things now that the election's behind us, as far as laws changing going forward. And I want to preface that by saying, I don't know if you caught this or not, but I've seen Trump speak at an NRA national meeting twice. I used to go to all the NRA meetings as a VIP because the CEO of the Washington Times was a friend of mine. And if you donate over $1 million a year to the NRA, you get all these perks for VIPs and stuff. So I'm like Forrest Gump. I didn't have the $1 million. I didn't pay the $1 million, but I got to participate. And Trump released a statement yesterday saying that he's completely lost faith in the NRA. And the NRA responded and said, and we understand exactly why he doesn't have faith in us. And Trump's big thing was the advertising firm in New York, which was literally a money laundering scheme. Crazy thing is that I've met Oliver North multiple times and had dinner with him. And I was really surprised that he was kind of mixed up in all that. It was, if it's not fraud, it was borderline fraud, the way the money was funneled. So anyway, now that I've prefaced that, we know Donald Trump's not a fan of the NRA. He claims to be Second Amendment guy, kind of iffy on that. Like, not that I give a crap about bump stocks, but I was surprised to see that come out of his first admin. So with all that being said, what's your crystal ball say that's coming up?
I don't have a crystal ball on that. First of all, I can tell you that we monitor legislation that's out there. We're really just trying to look ahead to see what kind of impact it might have on members. Jennifer, who's one of our attorneys, in part of her career, she was actually one of the general counsels to the governor of Oklahoma here, and she wrote legislation, and not necessarily about firearms, but she really understands from that experience the legislative process and what that looks like. And so she does all of our research there. And a lot of times the members are notifying us. They're like, hey, this bill just got started, and like there's one going through the process in Maryland that's kind of weird. And we'll monitor, and we're just trying to look ahead and look around the corner to see what does that mean for our ability to serve the members in that area, or the things that the members might have concerns about in their day-to-day carrying or getting a permit, keeping their permit. You probably remember from the beginning of this year, the end of last year too, that California SB2, which was a big deal, right? We were the first person in the industry. We came out, I think it was on January 2nd or 3rd, right after it went active, and said, our benefits have nothing to do with that. Like, if you're in violation of SB2, but you're involved in a self-defense incident, we don't care. Like, we're going to provide the benefits to you. Doesn't matter whether or not you violated SB2. So if it's self-defense, we cover it. And so we're going to take care of it. And we took a public stance on that. And we got a flood of members in California just from doing that. And actually, all we did was we took we created this internal communication for all our California members, and we just sent it to them. And then somebody dropped it on a message board somewhere. And we're like, that's fine. And so we just posted it up on Facebook. I mean, it was no secret. But again, we were just prioritizing our member base. It wasn't really designed to be a recruiting tool to get new members. And so we look at those kinds of things. And again, principles are still the same. Right? If you have a self-defense incident, it's covered, right? And we just need some evidence of self-defense, and the process starts about what the member reports to us. So we're listening to them. We're not trying to disprove it or prove it or anything else. We're trying to get moving on, taking care of them. So I don't know what's coming. I know there's a lot of stuff out there, but we're always looking for, does it affect where people can carry, like SB2 was? That's important to us. Is it easier or harder to get a permit? Are there things changing on the administrative actions around people's permits. We have a lot of stuff covered administrative actions that are a result of self-defense. So if you lose, like in Illinois, we have a number of members that they get an administrative action against their FOID card, right? They get this FOID card to be a firearms owner up there. And so, we've helped members with several of those. It just happens. And so we're looking at all those kinds of things. Yes, we're looking at things where it's an actual firearms restriction, like, size of the magazine and all those kinds of other things. But again, it's just to the point where how does it affect how we serve the members? So we just want to make sure that there's no legislation that's going to prevent us from doing what we need to do, or making sure that we communicate to the membership not to worry about this legislation as it relates to our relationship with them.
Yeah, that's great. By the way, that's Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North and me. So I typically refer to myself as, like I said, the Forrest Gump of the business world, because I'm never the smartest guy in the room, but I'm always blessed to get invited to all these great adventures over my career and lifetime. So, cool. All right, moving on from there to membership and coverage. I think we've covered the first question. The second question's a good one, though. Can you share a success story where CCW Safe's intervention made a significant difference for a member?
I can. Yeah, we've had quite a few, and I'll just preface it by saying some of our members, they go through some very serious incidents, and they don't want us to talk about it, or they don't want to, right? And they don't want to, and it's okay. We don't, but we have some who are like, I can't wait to tell people what you guys did, right? And it's awesome. We love it. So the most known incident that we've covered was a case down in North Carolina about 7 or 8 years ago. And it was we were the first company in this industry to defend a member in a self-defense case that had a possible murder one outcome. And we were very successful. He was completely innocent, acquitted, exonerated. He's a great guy. If you met this guy, he's a high intelligence, very personable, low-key guy, not looking for trouble. He has a really nice job in the supply chain and operations world, 6-figure type guy. There's a couple of things he would tell you about how our help changed his life. The first thing he would tell you is, without our help, he would be in prison today. He was just convinced that there was no way out, without this kind of assistance. And it wasn't just the money, because he'll also tell you, he said, even if I had $1 million in the bank, the day that occurred, I might still be in prison, because I wouldn't know who to call and how to spend it and what's the right way and what's going to go on. And so it's very significant. But in his particular incident, without getting into the details, I mean, it was a clear self-defense situation. He had been attacked multiple times by the same person. And so on the third attack in the same day, he did use his firearm, and he shot the person, and they died. And the police showed up and looked at some very sort of cosmetic circumstances, for lack of a better phrase, and said, this looks like a murder. And so they arrested him and took him to jail. He called us, and the process kicked in from there. It was a multi-year process for him to get through the trial. We spent a little over $400,000 on his behalf. And, every resource we had, we put into it. That was a very, very, very big case. And we always still do that now, but that was the first one where it was like, wow, okay. And he was not in a big city. He was in a rural area. Even the attorney selection was interesting, because some of the cosmetic circumstances of his case, there were attorneys that didn't want to do it. And, these superficial things that people don't want to get mixed up in. And so we overcame all that adversity. This is going to tie back into our point earlier. One of the key things that got the success in his case were the investigators and the expert witnesses, because we got the best of the best. And there were some things that the law enforcement and the medical examiner had done that we were able to exploit in that case on his behalf. And, you know, he's completely exonerated. It's 7 or 8 years, 6 years later now. And, you know, he still does videos and testimonials for us. And it's very gratifying, but he'll also tell you he still thinks every day about taking somebody's life, even though it's completely justified. Wow. Yeah. So, you know, of course, we provided counseling, and, you know, actually he and Mike just have an ongoing relationship because of Mike's experience and what Mike went through, you know, personally with his shooting. You know, they talk regularly throughout the year. I don't remember who I was telling Mike. This is the Christmas card I get every year from him. Nice. And so it just came in this week. Awesome. I mean, he's an awesome guy. And, you know, we've had other members go through incidents just as serious. We had a lesser severity incident in LA. And this story probably doesn't get told as much, but it was a guy just on his way home from the gym, stopped at the convenience store to get some milk. Car pulls up next to him. Some stuff occurs. He gets out of the car. One guy comes around from the front. Somebody else came from behind. He turns to look at the behind person, gets smacked in the side of the head, goes down nearly unconscious. Firearm pops out on the pavement. The guy had already threatened to kill him with his own firearm. Was going for that. I remember got it, shot the person, calls 911. While he's on the phone with 911, the second person that was with the person that he shot is calling in reinforcements. You can imagine this situation. You're on with 911 saying, okay, there's been a shooting and, you know, you need to get here. And he's hearing the other person on the phone go and say, hey, this guy just shot so-and-so, get over here and, you know, do whatever. And so super high stress situation. And then he actually, in his story, he'll tell you, he had binged on all of our content. He's like, so I knew what to do. I knew where to get to. I knew how to be ready when the police arrived and what to do, you know, to not be standing there with my gun in my hand and hoping they would figure it out. And, you know, got that out on the concrete, laid down. Like I knew what to do because I had studied the information available in the resources. So fast forward, he did get arrested and put in jail. We bonded him out pretty quickly. I had boots on the ground the next day. It was about a 2.5 week process. We hired a great attorney. This is in Southern California. And they had a proactive strategy where they went to the DA's office on their own, called in and said, we want to come in and talk about it. And they got, you know, which you know, generally known as a no file, which means he didn't file any charges, and they got everything in writing. You know, in his case, I think we got the expungement done, so it's all on the record. And you know, it just, things happen fast. And so in that case, I want to say our expenses were, you know, high teens, 18, 19,000, 15,000, something like that, you know, just like that, it happens. And so there's a lot of incidents we could go through, but those two stand out. And it's now I feel like you, Chris, something's popping in my head from earlier. You know, talking about the stress that you go through when you're not sleeping and all these other things. And he did a video for us. And I remember this quote. He says in this video, when the guys came, and in that time it was Gary and another guy who's retired now, Rob, who was another great critical response person we had. And he said, when Gary and Rob got there, and I had been bonded out already, and we went to dinner. And he said, I went home that night and I could sleep. He's like, I just, everything I knew was going to be okay was better because I knew what was happening. There was two people there looking me in the eye, you know, sort of metaphorically holding my hand. And he goes, I was able to sleep. And that I knew I had this team of experts on my side. And it was just a huge relief to see somebody and know that I wasn't doing this by myself.
Man, that's awesome. I mean, that's, how do you put a number on that, right? How do you quantify something like that? It's priceless. literally.
You don't. We always talk about personal care, and it's hard to communicate. When you're on the website, it's like, okay, whatever, yeah, personal care. But those are the instances. We just had another a member email us, I think it was last week, about it. It was a very serious incident that I can't discuss, but he and his wife both were on this email saying, we just can't tell you what a difference it made that somebody came and was here the next day and looking at us and talking to us and sitting, in our living room or whatever the scenario was. I don't remember, but it's like that just made a huge difference for us. And this is a guy who never got charged with anything, did not actually get arrested, but it was serious enough that we were like, you know what, let's send somebody out. This is for real. He discharged that firearm, and let's go. And so we love getting those, and it just makes a huge difference. Again, nobody else does this in the industry, and it's a really critical part of the process.
Yeah. So what stands out for me there, Kent, is that regardless of the nature of a relationship, business to consumer, friends, whatever the case may be, you really don't know where you stand with the other party until the shit hits the fan. And then you find out, really where you stand. And I had a mentor when I was, young in the early part of my career. And he said something to the effect of, number one, you're young and you're nowhere near as smart as you think you are, which I came to find out as being true. The hard way. And he said, you're going to make a bunch of mistakes, and I don't care. All I'm asking you is to use each one of those mistakes as an opportunity to deepen our relationship with the customer. And essentially what the process was that he was describing is that, yeah, you're selling products to a customer and some bad thing happens. They find out that, yes, you're going to work with them and protect them, or that you're not. And so what he was asking me to do was to make sure that we solved whatever the problem was quickly and, did something in return to make up for it to the customer. And he was right.
Yeah.
They were our most loyal customers, because none of us are perfect. It's how you handle the mistake. But those people then knew after that, when I made mistakes, because I was young and not as smart as I thought I was, that whatever the mistake was, we were going to cover it. We were going to make sure that you're looked after and that it's okay. And like I said, those were the most loyal customers that I had at that particular point in my career. So
yeah, same thing applies.
A lot to be said for what you were doing there, for sure. So let's go to the other end of the spectrum here, Kent. Can you describe the most difficult, challenging case that you had to take on, and any lessons learned?
They're all unique, right? But that case that I mentioned earlier, where it was the first one in the industry where it was a possible murder outcome.
Okay.
That's a giant challenge. I mean, the stakes don't get any higher, right?
Yeah.
That's like,
yeah.
And of course, we can't change the facts of the case. We can't change the circumstances of the case. But as you know, in the legal world, those are just part of, how decisions are made. And so that was the high stakes case. I wouldn't say that there were any mistakes in there. I think what we find in some of these cases is we find some confirmation around things that we're doing, like the on-site response, like the unlimited amounts of money that we spend on experts and investigators. And so we found a lot of confirmation in what we do. I don't know that we've had cases where we come back and say, wow, we should do this very differently. Gotcha. It tends to be, and we're not perfect. People might listen to this and go, oh, these guys don't ever make a mistake. We're not perfect, but we just really do focus on the most important things. And so all of that core service that we're delivering, it usually ends up in a confirmation. And so it helps us not only to just make sure that that's part of everything that we do. And so sometimes we learn, hey, we didn't necessarily do this on this one case, but we should be doing some of that. So it wasn't a mistake that was detrimental to anything, but it's something where it might enhance what we're doing in the future. And when the stakes are that high, that's why you have us, because we won't make a mistake, and we'll have everything that you need. So those don't come along very often, thankfully, for the members. That's another thing that I sometimes chuckle about, because people are like, yeah, you love it when you don't You know, it saves you money when the members don't get into these incidents. And I'm like, we don't care about that. We don't want anybody to go through what you have to go through in those kinds of incidents. And it's, the money is really not relevant at all. We want to take care of people, no matter what the cost is in those cases. But when we talk to a guy like the one I discussed, where it's 6 years later and he's saying, you know, not a day goes by that I don't think about taking somebody's life, even though it was justified. That's what we don't want you to have. That's why we don't want you to go through that incident. By the way, you know, we've had members get divorced during their aftermath and trials. They lose their jobs almost certainly if you get charged with murder. Your job is toast. You know, that's a lot. We don't want them going through any of that, much less the actual incident itself. That aftermath is pretty brutal, and we just really would not have that for anyone if it's completely avoidable. And that's why we do the education and training.
No, well, yeah, so that's good, because that actually, the next category I've got is education and training. And I think we answered the first one on how does CCW Safe educate its members. You've got this awesome repository of information on your website that's free to the public and not just members. Or are there other specific training programs or partnerships that you've developed to kind of take things up a level?
Yeah, so what we tend to do is we do partner with people, but we just bring that content over. And so now there is some content on our site that is for members only. There's a handful of content, but the vast majority of it is open to the public, and certainly anything that you would need to understand how to deal with self-defense incidents. But we'll partner with people who are experts. You know, Andrew Branca, a lot of people know who he is. He's been a partner of ours for a long time, law of self-defense. He has an amazing website and an amazing service. You know, we partner with Branca to create specific content. Actually, we just put out some new videos from him in the last 10 days. So we'll partner with folks and then just bring that content onto the site. We partner with folks who are professional shooters. You know, JJ Racaza, a lot of people know Julie Golub. They're both ambassadors of ours. They come in and do training. You know, we got a little series out now from JJ that's just the basics of shooting. I mean, we have some members who they bought their firearm, it's sitting in the nightstand at home, and they maybe shot in that first, you know, gun 101 class that they took. So we put out a pretty broad spectrum of stuff. We don't just have high-end expert, you know, stuff on there. And there's a lot of legal analysis, so we'll bring in some other legal experts. There's a guy actually who lives down your way named Sean Vincent, who he has a business. You know, on the legal side, he's not an attorney, but he does jury selection expertise all over the country. He does all kinds of other legal analysis and he was an assistant on the Zimmerman case down there with Don 10 years ago. So he does a tremendous amount of content with us. So Jeff Gonzalez, who you might know, right? Jeff does a lot of stuff. He put out a great book about 3 or 4 years ago, Jeff's book, Concealed Carry Handbook, which is really high quality. And so we had Jeff come in and basically do a 3 or 4 minute video synopsis of each of the chapters to get people the highlights, but encourage them to get the book and get more education. And so we tend to do it through partnerships like that, where we bring the experts in and freelance writers, and we pay them, and we put the content on the site for free.
Nice. Well, and that works because the people who follow those people trust them. And so the trust, therefore, that their followers have in them gets transferred to you, and vice versa. The trust people have in you gets transferred to him. So that's a good thing.
Yeah. And we're very, 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 very picky about, you know, who we put on a video and, you know, who they appeal to. Julie Golub, who's an amazing shooter, if you know Julie, you know, she's been a competitive shooter for a long time, and was on the Army pistol team, you know, right, as a very young person. She did a series of short videos for ladies about just getting started in concealed carry. And I remember coming from work one day and my wife said, I just watched that video with Julie. And I didn't realize I could, you know, I didn't remember what the detail was, but, you know, she's like, I'm gonna try a little bit of what Julie was talking about.
Interesting.
Okay. Great.
That's fantastic. The next category we had was response to incidents, and we've already covered that. So I'll move down to public perception and advocacy.
Sure.
Do you engage in any lobbying or advocacy work?
We advocate for our members in their aftermath of a self-defense incident in terms of, actual political lobbying, political advocacy. We don't do that.
Okay.
There's some great organizations out there that are really, really good at that. So we let the experts do that. I mean, there's some that we like. We're not endorsing any of them. Like for me personally, I'm a member of GOA. I think that's a good organization. We see a lot of great activity out of, you can name probably more than I can, FPC or whoever it is. There's just a lot of people who are really good. So we're staying focused on what we do.
You just hit my top two, GOA.
Okay.
And FPC.
Oh, good. Now I feel better about myself.
No, absolutely. Yeah. They're doing awesome work. And I don't know who runs the FPC's Twitter account or X account, but whoever it is, man, they're on the money. Yeah, I won't say anything more than that, but yeah, they're really, really good. They are not 100%. Afraid to go. They are not afraid to go toe to toe with the government. They relish it. It's awesome. I love them. So next category then would be future plans. Do you have any interesting strategies that you're going to use to grow your membership by chance, or does it just keep growing organically?
Well, I mean, it grows organically, right? And I know one of the questions you had on there was about the mission and does that change in the future? The mission stays the same, right? We're still focused on providing the best possible service to the members, in these incidents, and providing the education and training. So we will start diversifying a little bit how we go and get members. There are a lot of people who sign up for a service like ours at the conclusion of their concealed carry class. Mm-hmm. And we've never gone to market that way. We've never tried to be present like that, but we will. And so that's new coming in 2025. We're kicking that off at the SHOT Show, actually. So you have the breaking news right now. Nobody publicly knows this.
Well, and we'll see you at SHOT Show. We'll be there.
Yes.
But yeah, I can tell you from firsthand knowledge that a couple of your competitors are involved in CWP training here in Florida, where it's, a weekend course, and it's actually somebody from one of those organizations leading the course and then signing them up at the end of it. And a really high sell-through rate. It's top of mind, right? It's a lot easier to sell somebody something that's top of mind than to say, stop thinking this other thing and think what I want to sell you. The paradigm shift's a hard sale, but that's awesome. That's fantastic, Ken. I have no question in my mind. You will do very well with that, and good for you.
I appreciate it. We've had a call for it. The facilities out there, whether the ranges or retailers, will call in and they're like, well, this person comes now, and we just want to make sure that we're offering the best services and products to our consumers, our customers, and we don't know if we're doing that with this person, but we know if we had you, we would. And so, it pulled us in to the point eventually where we're like, we've got to do this. We've got to reach these people. At that point, it's that inflection point where they're making the decision, and let's get them there. So yeah, stay tuned. There's a lot coming on that in the very, very near future.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And if it's all right with you, if we can sync up in Vegas, we'll try to capture some of that and get the word out to our followers. I mean, we go live 7 p.m. Eastern, 7 days a week. And I'm anticipating that while we're at SHOT Show, we will just have a plethora of information to share with our followers. And when you talk purpose, that's our purpose. The reason that we're called Survival Dispatch is because our job is to dispatch information so our fellow Americans and friends of Americans can survive in these very uncertain times. That's it. Yep. We dispatch information. That's all we do. So, it's like you were saying, you mentioned something earlier with regards to the mission, like the putting the members' best interest first and foremost. Then you mentioned something on the money side of it. There's a really famous guy named Simon Sinek who had this like 17-minute TED talk on the word why, and how barely anybody tells you why they do what they do, but that's what actually attracts people, right? Dr. Martin Luther King, for example, he likes to ask a trick question. How many people went to Washington, D.C. on that 80-degree or 100-degree day, late August 1963 for Dr. Martin Luther King? And the answer is 0. They didn't go for Dr. Martin Luther King. They went for themselves because they believed in the same things as Dr. Martin Luther King. So connecting the purpose, the why, is a lot of businesses don't do that. So I gave Mike kudos, and I'll say the same to you on nailing that, because in all my years of consulting, and I was in a business development role in high tech and then a private consultancy after that, is approximately 1/3 of the businesses that we worked with, when we were onboarding them and we asked them, why do you do what you do? They would say, to make money. And we would press them and say, well, money is a byproduct of what you do. It's a result of why you do what you do. So why do your feet hit the ground running in the morning? And they just look at us and go, to make money. And so you've got 1/3 at least. That's my experience of people who are in business to make money. Then you have the other 2/3 that they may or may not know what their purpose is. You guys clearly know what your purpose is. I know what our purpose is at Survival Dispatch, but I've worked with many companies over the years, Ken, and just no answer. Like, it's like they're a ship with no rudder, sort of thing. So anyway,
I tell everybody in the office on our team, if we just take care of the members, everything else takes care of itself. It's really that simple. And so, that's always at the top. Again, if we're doing something that's not related to helping the members, we shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, that's so clear and concise. I love it. We could have long discussions on those sort of things. I'm a huge fan of one-page business plans and one-page business model concepts and all that kind of stuff, to distill it down so it's easy to understand, which means it's easy to sell, which means it's easy to buy into. But anyway, I won't go down that rabbit hole any further. I will ask you this, though. I mean, you've got this awesome singular vision, purpose, and why. I think I know the answer to this. What's your vision for CCW Safe in the next 5 years? And if I had to guess, it'd be more of the same.
It is. We want to serve more people, right? That I think we want to create awareness. And some of the times what we do in promoting CCW Safe, we're generally just promoting the industry and making people aware. Even, the commercial spot that you showed it to open tonight, we ran that on Newsmax a couple years ago.
Nice.
And that opening sentence, or 2 sentences, whatever it is, says, hey, if you own a firearm and you discharge it in self-defense, you could face thousands and thousands of dollars of legal expenses.
Mm-hmm.
We ran that, the phones lit up. And the call basically was, hey, I just saw this on TV. Like, what? Like, what do you mean I'm going to face tens of thousands of dollars of legal? Like, what? That cannot be right. And of course, that gives us the opportunity to tell them. And so we sometimes end up, promoting the industry with that, just so that people are aware that there are consequences of not having a service. We never talk to people about being afraid of getting attacked or someone breaking in. Like, you own a gun. You already have made the decision that you need to do something about that. We're involved in what happens after you have to defend yourself. So yeah, it is more of the same. And, we would love to get bigger. People always ask me, do you guys want to be the biggest? And I give, this trite answer that sounds canned, which is that's not our goal. Our goal is to be the best. And if we're the best at what we do, the size takes care of itself. If that means we end up the biggest, that's great. If it means we end up somewhere else, that's okay too. But if we're not providing the best service, then being the biggest doesn't matter.
So you end up the fat hedgehog, basically.
It is. And the business grows great. It's growing organically. I always tell people, Mike and all those guys did also the really heavy lifting long before I got here, and gave me this beautiful thing to continue to, nourish and grow. And that's what we're going to keep doing. So we're not going to start branching off into other stuff and, doing holster reviews. And that's just that we're not doing that. Yeah.
I hear you. So Ken, can you address the question I have up on the screen? I think there's a miscommunication here.
Yeah, it's not. So you don't have to have carry permit to belong to CCW Safe. There's 20, I'm going to get the number wrong, 28 states now, I think, constitutional carry, so you don't have to have a permit. If you live in a state that requires a permit to carry, like California as an example, and you don't have a permit and you just have your firearm at home for self-defense, we have a plan for that too. So you do not need a permit at all. We give there's a little bit of a pricing break for people who have a permit, but that's about it. So no matter, except now, of course, just for people who are watching, New York State, New Jersey, Washington State, we don't do business in those 3 states. Everywhere else, we got you. And we don't cut, even if you live in Idaho and you cross over and have your incident in Washington State, I can't help you, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's unfortunate for sure. And I believe you had a chance to meet Dr. Jennifer Stankus in Pahrump at Front Site Prairie Fire.
Oh, yeah. Jen, yeah.
Did she ever have a chance to tell you, by the way, that, so the background there quickly, and some of our audience is familiar with Jen because we've had her on a few times, and my wife and I have shot some TV shows with her as well, but she's a veteran of 2 branches of the military. She was a JAG officer at one point in time.
Right.
She was a U.S. Marshal. She is a practicing emergency room MD. So her and Seth worked 2 weeks in the hospital in a row in Tacoma, and then they fly home to Vegas for a couple weeks. And she's also a licensed attorney, and her side gig of all these things is a professional. She's an expert witness.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the gentleman's name for the life of me, but there was an incident in Tacoma or Seattle, one of the two, where there were 3 officers involved and the perpetrator died. And this happened just before George Floyd. So they had a Soros-backed DA who watched what unfolded with George Floyd. And when that took the turns that it did, they turned around and charged these 3 officers with murder. And Jen ended up the expert witness in this case. And she's so smart. She rented a car for the week that she was driving down to, the courthouse, because she suspected somebody might try and follow her, because there were multiple death threats. There are all kinds of bad groups involved around this. And her testimony got all 3 of them off, rightly so. There was no murder. It wasn't even like, accidental homicide or anything like that. They were not responsible for that man's death. And she literally cried tears of joy, because she says the most important thing that she's ever done in her career. She knows that she saved those 3 men from going through what Derek Chauvin's going through right now, which is a whole other rabbit hole. But
yeah.
And we just covered the Daniel Penny stuff. Thank God he got off, but he's been financially ruined. And now we've got civil lawsuits coming. And a couple of our followers, they were going to start like a give, send, go for him, but then discovered there's already one going.
Yeah.
And I think they raised $3 million, but that $3 million was gone. Like, that's what it cost to defend them, to get them off, basically.
Okay.
So
it's insane. And the civil piece, some people don't think about. We haven't really talked about that, but all of our plans include the civil defense as well, and all uncapped, unlimited expenses. Now, if you want civil liability coverage, so if there's a financial judgment against you, we have that available.
Mm-hmm.
Add that to a plan, or in your case, you and your wife are on the ultimate plan, so there's some of that baked in. But that's something else to think about. That those are much less frequent, but of course, it only takes one to really hurt your financial.
Well, I mean, a great example of a debacle like that would be O.J. Simpson. Everybody knows he was guilty. The jury pool knew he was guilty. They specifically let him off because of what they perceived to be injustices towards Rodney King. But he got smoked in the civil action. So just because you get out of the criminal one doesn't mean that you're going to skate on the civil side. And the fact that CCW Safe covers people for that, it was important for us, Kent. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Again, rare, but it's not, the occurrence is not zero. I can tell you that. We've had a number over the years.
Well, I mean, I learned many, many years ago, like when you're younger, of course, you think only bad things happen to other people. And then I started this process of being in one grievous wreck after another. And the first one took my left side of my face off and destroyed my left eye in the process, which is why that's a prosthetic eye. And I was only 27 years old at the time. And I thought to myself, dang it, like this stuff's supposed to happen to other people. And it doesn't. It happens to all of us. So having protection on the civil side, that's one of those things where if you don't have it, there's probably a good chance you're going to wish you had it at some point. But if you've got it, you probably won't need it.
Yeah, I always tell people it depends on your assets and all that. I have a nephew who's a member. A couple years ago when he joined, he was in early 20s, and he's like, do I need to get this civil liability thing? And I said to him, I go, well, you have an 18-year-old pickup truck, an apartment with a mattress on the floor. You're good. Don't worry about it. They can have everything. They can take everything you have. That's probably not a problem for you. But if you're like yourself or me, you're at a stage in life where you have assets and stuff, then
exactly,
it's something to think about.
Yeah, for sure. So we're running a little long here, but I do have a couple questions left. If you got time, I wanted to ask you, and I'm pretty sure I know what the answer to this question is, but how do you handle cases where public opinion might not favor the member's action, yet they are legally justified?
Yeah. So I'm going to say this. We don't care what the public opinion is, right? That's not relevant to us, broadly speaking. Now, we also do have a provision for assisting with public relations for members that get involved in a higher profile case. We haven't really had to use it, but we had a case a couple years ago where we were monitoring for some potential trouble. None ever, public opinion wise, but nothing ever materialized. And so we have that ready and available, but we haven't really had to use it yet, but we know what we'll do. But other than that, there's not a ton that we do. We certainly don't deliver any of the other service differently. I think there would be some other things that would trigger, we had actually, this probably relates to it. So we had an incident a couple years ago in one of the Western states, and the member was attacked, had to defend himself, use the firearm, and it did shoot and kill the person. And he was afraid of some retaliation in his particular instance. And so we actually put him up at an alternate location for a period of time, not at his home, until things settled down a little bit. And then even then, we sent Gary, our friend Gary went on site with them at their home and did a security assessment and talked to them about, shoring up some things around the home, and then for them how to transition in and out of the home and to just be safer, and things that they could do to have better security in their home if they were still concerned about this retaliation thing. And nothing ever materialized. And again, back to those things you can't put in the contract. It's like, Gary's like, I'll just go there and take care of everything and get them educated and show them, where they need to get a lock or redo a lock, or how, be careful when they're going in the garage and out, whatever those types of things were. But yeah, so we do have a few things where we'll provide some extra benefits to the members, but we won't find them in the contract, but we'll do it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm just looking for something here. You know about this, and some of our audience knows about this, but not all of them. Let me just pull this up quickly here. So we've got a new show underway with our friends at American Stories Entertainment.
Oh, nice.
And called Fortress. And I'm assuming that Bob Seafales mentioned this to you, but this TV show that's going to be on the Pursuit channel is kind of like Home Improvement meets Chuck Norris. So the idea is that we're going to fortify Americans and their families and their home. And it's a lot of the stuff that you just mentioned with regards to Gary going on site with that person. There's so many easy things that can be done, right?
Right.
Like we have, for example, we got these nasty little palm trees here in Florida called robolinis, and they've got needles on them like this that are so sharp they'll go through leather. I've had chaps on before from my riding motorcycle, straight through the leather into your leg, and then it injects this crazy poison. But if you put those under the windows of your home, nobody is coming through the window to get inside your house. Things like that. Yeah. Some strategic landscaping, those sort of things. But it's definitely an interesting topic. And now that I know that Gary does that sort of stuff, I know Gary's retired for all intents and purposes, but maybe semi-retired. I'd like to talk to him about that. Maybe he's the next guest that we could snag from CCW Safe and have him on.
I'm sure. Yeah. He loves doing that.
Sorry, Ken. We've
No,
spoken,
you're fine.
Yeah, we've spoken on numerous times. Lots of emails. Super duper guy. Just an awesome
Great.
guy. All right, last bucket here. Are there any trends that you're noticing in the self-defense coverage industry for gun owners? Or do you anticipate any technology coming around that'll change the industry? Or does it all just look like more of the same?
Well, on the technology piece, I'll answer that first. I don't necessarily anticipate any new technology that would change sort of the core of what we do. Now, as you know, you could probably talk for a long, long time about there's technology out there in terms of, non-lethal means, right? Other than a firearm, there's a lot of things going on in those arenas, and we get those calls, right? If I use a pepper balls, are they covered? All that stuff is covered. So we see that going on as something that's newer and different than when we started the business. But other trends in the industry, there's nothing. I would say this: there are some trends, but I'm not real happy about them. And what you're seeing is there's little what we just call whack-a-mole companies that pop up, and they say, yeah, we're in this, and we'll pay, and we'll get you an attorney, and then they're gone in a year. And people are not getting the service. And you talked about one of those earlier. And so there's a lot of those that pop up, and they don't really know what they're doing. They think this is a very simple service to deliver, and it's not. It has a lot of complexity, and it has, of course, a lot of financial implications. And so, if you can get 100 people to sign up paying you $20 a month, that doesn't give you the money you need to take care of anything.
Yeah.
And so that's a concern. We see that going. So I would just suggest to anybody that's thinking about getting a provider for the first time, look at the ones who've been around for a while. Of course, we're the best, and we can prove that. But there's other people out there. But just do some homework and feel comfortable that the person you're dealing with is going to be around for a long time. I always encourage people, get the one that they're experts at what they do. They have a track record. So we see that. And then the other thing we see is we're now seeing, and again, I don't like this trend, and you've heard me pitch over and over and over, we're solely focused on the one thing. You're seeing some of these providers start to provide services that are not related to self-defense. And so they have sort of this mission creep going on where they're starting to sell you like what I think people would call prepaid legal programs. So like, oh, well, we'll help you get an attorney to write a will, or with a traffic ticket, or this kind of stuff. And again, you don't do business with somebody who has people in the office trying to figure out who's the best attorney to read your daughter's apartment lease. Like, you want people in the office who are experts at self-defense. And so we're seeing that there's at least two companies out there. One of them is one of the bigger ones who are diversifying into this thing that we would just consider mission creep. And you know better than I do what happens when you have mission creep. So those are a couple of trends that I really don't like. I just want, it's bad for the industry when somebody doesn't provide good service. It's bad for the industry, when people come and go out of the business quickly. And we've just had our 13th anniversary in August of this year, and we're not going anywhere. We're going to be around for a long time doing exactly what we do, which is taking the best care of somebody when they get in their self-defense incident.
Yeah. So I had lunch with Coach Lou Holtz many years ago, winningest football coach, NCAA football history. And it was a 4-hour lunch, and we all walked away shell shocked because the insight that he dropped on us was phenomenal. He's a super intelligent man. And he said something that stuck with me all these years. He said that your business is just like a tree. It's in one of two states. It's either growing or dying. He says, when you look at the life cycle of a tree, there's no such thing as maintaining status quo. So it always stuck in my head. You're always growing or you're dying, sort of thing, right? And when you mention people in your industry getting into these, legal services on the periphery, those sort of things, the way I interpret that is that they've plateaued on whatever their core competency is. They're trying to stay alive and stay relevant, but they're now the skinny fox, because we're looking to give you self-defense coverage. We're going to help you with, all these other legal things, your will, like you stated, and stuff like that. And that's usually the beginning of the downward trend in my experience in business development. So,
yeah, it could be, and there's no hard rule about what I'm about to say next, but it is something else to consider is who owns the business that you're going to do business with? Is it a private equity company? That isn't necessarily bad, but in many cases, the businesses are run very differently. It's highly dollar focused, and to your point, right? Oh,
100%.
it's kind of flattened out, and we got to do something different. And it's we're owned by two retired law enforcement officers and a retired attorney. We were started by them. We're still owned by them. The mission was their idea. So that part matters too. So you should take that into account if you're still kind of trying to figure out who's who and where they're really going. And that's, again, what makes us different.
Yeah. So Kent, I'm not going to do chapters 2 and 3 tonight like I normally do. I have just a little bit of homework for our audience that I wanted to discuss with you. As far as our audience is concerned, tomorrow night, the primary topic will be these UFOs in the Northeast. And then we'll have our regular news headlines in chapter 2. And then we'll have some stuff that'll put a smile on your face in chapter 3. But for tonight, we're going to wrap it up here with Kent. So Kent, I believe I mentioned to you that when we started Survival Dispatch News, I was really adamant that I don't want to report something that's at the top of the news cycle, editorialize something at the top of the news cycle, and leave a bunch of disenfranchised people to say, all I see is talking heads. It doesn't, nothing I do matters, sort of thing, right? So we've always had this aspect of, at the end of an episode of Survival Dispatch News, we assign our audience homework, things that they can do in light of whatever the thing is that we were discussing. You'd be surprised, Kent. I get emails, like I average between 400 and 500 legit emails a day, not including all the spam, which, is mostly filtered. But I get a lot of emails from people saying, hey, I watched this episode like 2 months ago, and you mentioned this homework, and I went and did it, and here's the results. And they send me a screenshot of something they've done. That stuff, that for me, that means that we're succeeding in dispatching information, which is really what our core, that's what we're here for. So it makes me feel good that we're at least getting through to some people. So awesome. What can our audience do in light of everything we've discussed in this episode? I've got half a dozen bullets. Ken, if you want to add to any of them, just interrupt me. And if not, and you want to add some stuff at the end, that's cool as well. So first and foremost, and this messaging, of course, is to our audience, if you don't have self-defense coverage, investigate your options and make sure whoever you choose isn't selling you an insurance policy, and that the fine print doesn't include any recoupment or clawback clauses. And for anybody who's not clear, just one more time, it's against the law to pay out insurance benefits if you broke the law. 95% of criminal charges are pled out before you go to trial, because your attorney will tell you, don't roll the dice. You might go away for many decades. As soon as you sign a plea deal, you're admitting that you broke the law. And if you have bought an insurance policy that's covered your legal expenses and other stuff, they're going to recover it. They're going to have to pull it back from you, because it's against the law for them to give you those benefits, because you're now a criminal. If you have self-defense coverage, determine if you bought an insurance policy with recoupment or clawback clauses. Take appropriate action. Number 3, get professional training to improve your situational awareness and to become more proficient. So there's two sides of this. There's the mental and the physical aspect to it. We love Tony Blauer. Tony's a good friend of mine. You can take his HWS Human Weapon Systems course online. There's no martial arts involved. And I can guarantee you that you will be safer after taking that course. And don't quote me on this, but I think you can try. I think there's a discount code SD50. We don't get any commission. We gave the whole thing to our customers basically for the discount. But Tony Blauer Human Weapon System SD50 gets you 50% off, which I want to say drops the price to like $99. It's an awesome program. Great way to hone in on your situational awareness. Moving on from that, train, then train some more. Almost all skills are perishable, and your proficiency will decline if you aren't practicing on a regular basis. Yes, shooting a gun is kind of like riding a bicycle, but to be truly proficient at it, you get reps and reps and more reps to the point where you've burned these neural pathways that the synapses fire just like that. It's not muscle memory. It's burning these synapses in your brain. Next one, number 5, make your training fun with dry fire options that can be used inside and outside of your home. Knockdown laser targets are a good option. And I think, if I turn the camera on way over there on the other side, at the end of that table, there are that table right there. There's a whole bunch of knockdown targets, Kent. So if you hit them with a laser, they go ding and they fold over and then they pop right back up again. It's kind of like going to the fair, but nobody gives you a stuffed animal when you knock it down. But it's fun. It keeps it entertained. And number 6, inoculate yourself against stress and practice shooting with an elevated heart rate in between some form of physical exertion. I'm telling you right now that it was a serious kick in the butt for me, Kent, when I started that a few years ago. I thought I was a pretty good shot, and not so much when my heart rate was elevated. And now it's something that I'm proficient in. But boy, I can't imagine going into, say having a home invasion or being involved in a public shooting when your heart's pounding out of your chest. If you haven't been there, it's like Sun Tzu says, right? Human beings never rise to the occasion. They fall to their level of training.
Absolutely.
Did I miss anything as far as homework's concerned?
I would add one thing from our conversation earlier. Do some research and get some education on what to do in the immediate aftermath of your shooting and how to deal with the police. There's resources on our website. There's plenty available online and other places. It's great if you come to ours, but get educated on that, because in the heat of the moment, you're going to want to have rehearsed what you need to say and how you need to behave to make that process start in the best way possible.
Back to mental reps, if you've thought it through, you'll be in much better shape than kind of going by the seat of your pants when you're under significant duress, for sure. But
no, that's the only thing I had.
No, that's awesome, Ken. I appreciate it. Really appreciate your time. And, I'm really thankful that we crossed paths with CCW Safe, because like I said, we were pretty discouraged. We went through an 18-month period where I just went back and forth with Gary, did my due diligence and other stuff. And eventually it came down to, there is no other choice for us when you consider all the variables. So, awesome. And you know what? People can call that a shameless plug, whatever you want. So be it. It's our job to dispatch information, and that's the information we're sending out right now. So
I appreciate the kind words, and we're certainly grateful to have a partnership with you. And people, I should know, you were members long before we ever did anything different, right? And so we just appreciate it. We love the chance to talk to somebody in the level of detail that you cover things, and it's always good to see you, of course, and talk to you. And we'll be seeing you probably here.
I appreciate that very much. Yeah, I appreciate that very much, Kent. And I hope you all have a Merry Christmas. I don't say Happy Holidays. I say Merry Christmas. And I know you're not offended because we have the same values.
Indeed. Merry Christmas to you guys and the whole staff there. And we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And God bless America. My name is Chris Heaven, and I'm the CEO of Survival Dispatch. I was a member of our national powerlifting team for many years and won many state, national, and world championships. Even though I'm in great shape for being 55 years old, I am not immune to father time. Most of us feel weaker and make more trips to the bathroom as we get older. U.S. Army research has led to a breakthrough for the #1 water for older Americans. It's not a special sports drink, but a mix with essential nutrients most hydration drinks lack. Keyword, hydration. These nutrients are proven to enhance muscle strength, reduce soreness, and improve bladder health. A Texas doctor leveraged this research and formulated a drink mix to help you stay strong. Click the link below for up to 44% off at nativehydrate.com president.com/dispatch, plus free shipping and a free gift. This is one of the best deals I've seen for high quality BCAA drink mixes. Don't miss this deal.